One of the most frightening members throughout the history of the Lucchese crime family was Anthony Casso. Nicknamed the Gas Pipe, this made man became underboss but was most notorious as a hitman. He had a mean reputation and was known to get a sense of enjoyment from killing people. The exact number of people Anthony Casso killed isn't known to the public, but it's speculated that it could be anywhere from a few dozen to 100. There were a lot of things that surprised people about the Gas Pipe throughout his criminal career, but nothing shocked people more than when he switched sides and ratted out the mob. In today's video, we're going to cover the criminal life of Anthony the Gas Pipe Casso. We'll venture through his entry into the mob, infamous murders he's connected to, and how he became an informant. Stay tuned for the full story of the hitman turned mafia rat. Anthony Gas Pipe Casso was born in Brooklyn in 1942. He was rebellious from a young age, known to shoot at birds and instigate fistfights. He was also part of a South Brooklyn boys gang as a teenager. The Gas Pipe's descent into crime could have been due to the influences around him. His father had a criminal record for burglaries. Although it's said that his father tried to influence him to stay away from crime, young Anthony was intrigued by his father's past. He even learned that his father's rumored weapon of choice was the gas pipe, which inspired his infamous nickname. His father wasn't the only one to influence Anthony Casso's criminal career. It's believed that his godfather was a captain for the Genovese family. The South Brooklyn Boys was a street gang. When the Gas Pipe was with this gang, he was known to have a violent streak. After a fight with an Irish street gang, Anthony was sentenced to prison. While his family wanted to set him straight, it wasn't enough to put him on the right path. Word about Anthony Casso was starting to spread. Christopher Fernani from the Lucchese family had his eye on the young criminal. Eventually, he called the Gas Pipe in to help him with a loan sharking operation. He started with this operation, then eventually helped the mobster with gambling rackets. He was only 21 years old when he started working with the Lucchese family. When he joined, the mobsters noticed he had a very dark sense of humor. He would laugh when inflicting physical pain on others. There's an old story that claims he dropped 500 pounds of cargo on a dock worker's feet. Allegedly, the dock worker mentioned getting a new pair of work shoes. After dropping the cargo, the Gas Pipe laughed and said that he wanted to see how good the shoes were. Although Gas Pipe Casso started working with the Lucchese crime family in his early 20s, he didn't officially become a made man until he was in his 30s in the late 1970s. Throughout the 1980s, he climbed the ranks and became an underboss. Anthony Casso became a made man along with Vittorio Amuso. These two men both had a ruthless side to them. The crime family had a particular job for them. The intimidating mobsters were assigned to extort trucking and construction companies. This was just the beginning of their working relationship. They were a ruthless pair and ended up working together for over 2 decades. The Gas Pipe and Vittorio Amuso were also a part of Christopher Fernani's 19th Hole crew. With this crew, they formed another group, the Bypass Gang. This was a burglary ring made up of crew members who were experts at locksmithing and the setup of security systems. This gang was suspected of several burglaries throughout New York and Long Island. They were known to steal from deposit boxes and vaults. It's estimated that they stole roughly $100 million throughout the 1980s. The Gas Pipe was a feared and powerful force within the Lucchese crime family. He had what it took to get the job done, even if it meant resorting to violence. Whether it was gambling rackets, extortion, or burglary rings, Anthony Casso was willing to do anything for the Mafia. But out of everything he did, he was most infamous as a hitman. The Gas Pipe was one of the most ruthless hitmen that ever worked for the Lucchese family. In the 1990s, the Gas Pipe was charged with 72 criminal counts, which we'll get to later in this video. One of the investigators who worked on the case described this mobster as a ruthless homicidal maniac who enjoyed killing. Anthony Casso admitted to killing 36 people. However, it's believed that he was responsible for dozens more. One of the most infamous murders that the Gas Pipe was a part of was the retaliation attack on John Gotti. Paul Castellano was the boss of the Gambino crime family. He enforced a strict anti-drug policy that prevented members of the crime group from participating in the drug trade. This was a huge problem for made man on the rise John Gotti, who was involved in drug dealing. John Gotti and his allies planned and carried out the assassination of Paul Castellano in 1985. After this killing, John Gotti became the Gambino family boss. There were a lot of people that weren't happy about this, and some wanted him dead. This is when the Gas Pipe gets called to the mission. Vincent the Cingigante from the Genovese family was an ally of Paul Castellano. He wanted to plan out John Gotti's assassination and believed that the ruthless gas pipe was the best choice for the job. A few months after Paul Castellano's murder, John Gotti and his underboss Frank DeCicco were believed to be attending a meeting at the Veterans and Friends Social Club. The gas pipe had reached out to Herbert Pate and arranged for him to construct a bomb. Herbert constructed the bomb. On the day of the planned murder, he dropped a bag of groceries beside Frank DeCicco's car. When he bent down to pick up his groceries, he placed the bomb on the underside of the underboss's car. It seemed like the perfect plan, especially since nobody was around to see Herbert drop the grocery bag. He waited around with a remote control until it was time to set off the bomb. After seeing Frank DeCicco and an accomplice get in the vehicle, he set off the bomb, killing both men immediately. However, there was one big problem. The other man with Frank DeCicco wasn't John Gotti. Anthony Casso was fearless when it came to killing. He wouldn't hesitate when it came to taking out other influential Mafia members. He eventually admitted to playing a role in the killings of Roy DeMeo and Vladimir Reznikov on separate occasions. Over the years, several Mafia men have been accused and even admitted to being the ones to place the hit on Roy DeMeo. Nobody has officially been convicted of the murder. Paul Castellano was indicted but murdered before the trial played out. Allegedly, Paul Castellano wanted him dead but was having a lot of trouble finding someone to take on the contract killing. Nobody on the outside could get close to Roy DeMeo because he had hitmen around him 24/7. That's why the Gambino family wanted to hire someone that could get close. The gas pipe and a few of his men could allegedly get close to the infamous mobster and were brave enough to pull off this hit. When it came to killing, the gas pipe felt invincible. He didn't have to worry about going to prison because he had law enforcement on his side. NYPD officers Luis Eppolito and Stephen Caracappa were working for him. In an interview, the gas pipe gave details about how the police officers helped him out. He claimed that he could get them to capture his enemies by making them think they were under arrest. Instead of taking them to the police station, they would kidnap the victim and take them to a place assigned by Anthony Casso. The gas pipe even had unmarked police cars he bought, especially for these occasions. One victim in particular was Jimmy Heidel. The gas pipe had reason to think this young man had tried to kill him. The cops brought him to a barn where Anthony Casso was waiting to finish his business with him. For this capture, he paid the two cops $45,000. There were only a couple of police officers that Anthony Casso trusted. He had a strong hatred for authorities and the people who spoke to them. It was rumored that he would kill anyone who he believed was an informant. Some of his victims didn't even have to talk about him to receive a hit. If they were connected to an informant, they could make his hit list. Peter Chiotto was a police informant in the early 1990s. A hit was placed on him, but to his luck, he was too obese, so the bullets didn't penetrate any vital organs. But the war against this informant wasn't over. His sister, Patricia Capizzola, who had no connections to his Mafia affairs, was the next to be on the receiving end of one of the gas pipe's hits. She was also lucky enough to have survived the incident, but not all of his family was this fortunate. His uncle was shot to death and his body was later discovered frozen in the trunk of a car. The Lucchese family wasn't done yet. They also set fire to the garage of Peter Chiotto's 95-year-old grandmother to send a warning. Peter's lawyer was also receiving threats. Allegedly, the gas pipe threatened to kill the lawyer's wife if they testified. Eventually, the gas pipe streak of terror came to an end. Bodies were beginning to pile up and people were afraid. Alphonse Darco had reason to believe that he was going to be next on the hit list. He was afraid for his family's life, as he knew the gas pipe had no boundaries when it came to the people connected to those on his hit list. He contacted an FBI agent, putting himself and his family into witness protection and setting off an investigation on Anthony Casso and Vittorio Amuzzo. News of charges came out in 1990. The gas pipe became a fugitive and was on the run for nearly 3 years. During this time, he attempted to arrange the killings of a federal prosecutor and judge. He was eventually arrested in 1993 when he was stepping out of the shower at his mistress's home. Things were not looking bright for the gas pipe. He was getting charged with 72 criminal counts, which included 14 murders, even though he later admitted to more. This is when the gas pipe made a decision that nobody saw coming. He was looking at life in prison, so he decided to take a plea deal and become an informant. Anthony Casso became the one thing he used to kill people and their loved ones over. FBI agents allegedly pushed Anthony to come forward and admit all of his criminal activity. To this, he replied that he had committed a crime nearly every time he had left the house. It wasn't possible for him to remember everything he did. However, he was willing to cooperate and provide some information. He admitted that NYPD detectives Luis Eppolito and Stephen Caracappa were on his payroll and carried out 8 murders for him. Despite this information, he didn't prove to be the most reliable informant. At first, he admitted to killing 12 people. After more questioning, he confessed to killing 24 more. He was then discovered to have lied about his participation in attacks on Peter Chiato's family and the amount of money he possessed. FBI agents were becoming increasingly skeptical about the information he was providing. They made him take a lie detector test, and he ended up failing. The stories that the gas pipe was telling ultimately weren't given any weight. Authorities made the decision not to use him as a witness. They believed that his inside mafia stories weren't reliable and wouldn't go over well with the jury. He was also described as too evil to put on the stand. After all, most of his stories ended up with the gas pipe saying, "We killed him, of course." As part of his plea deal, Anthony Casso was given a spot in the witness protection program. Despite being in prison, his spot on the program could still keep him safe. There are specific rules that people have to follow to be protected. The gas pipe was caught breaking these rules and was evicted from the program in 1997. Old habits don't disappear overnight. Anthony Casso may have been locked up, but he still had old mobster tricks up his sleeve. He was accused of several infractions, such as bribing the prison guards, assaulting other inmates, including rival mobsters, and providing false information, specifically about Alphonse Darko and Sammy the Bull Gravano. Breaking the rules got the gas pipe kicked out of the witness protection program. He was then sentenced to 455 years in prison with no chance of parole. Ultimately, he was put away with convictions of extortion, bribery, tax evasion, racketeering, conspiracy, and murder. In prison, his health started to decline. He was diagnosed with prostate cancer in 2009. Problems began to pile up from there. He had lung issues from years of smoking, coronary artery disease, bladder disease, kidney disease, and hypertension. With such a weak system, he stood no chance when he was diagnosed with COVID-19 in 2020. He had to be taken to the hospital and put on a ventilator. Due to his health, his lawyers requested a compassionate release on November 28, 2020, but it was rejected. He ended up passing away on December 15, 2020. He was 78 years old when he died. The gas pipe Casso was a cold-blooded killer who had a strong influence in the Mafia. He started his criminal career in a street gang when he was young, but it didn't take long for him to catch the attention of made man Christopher Fernani. He introduced the young gas pipe to the Lucchese crime family, where he came in to help with gambling and racketeering operations. Casso showed a real passion for organized crime and eventually climbed the ranks in the Lucchese family. He became an official made man in his early 30s and worked his way to underboss. He was also one of the most ruthless hitmen the crime family ever worked with. He became the #1 guy to turn to when a mobster wanted to place a hit. When his criminal lifestyle caught up to him, Anthony Casso made a move nobody expected. He agreed to take a plea deal and become an informant for the FBI. While he earned a spot in witness protection from this deal, he ended up getting kicked out after breaking the rules. Ultimately, he spent the rest of his life in prison and died of COVID-19 in 2020. That wraps up our story on Anthony the Gas Pipe Casso. He was one of the most feared hitmen in Mafia history. Do you think he was a skilled hitman or just a psychopath who enjoyed killing? Let us know your take in the comments below. Don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe to see more Mafia Mystique content.